About a month ago, Zeltic uploaded a video where he organized 30 different Zelda content creators and asked them one simple question. What do you want to see in the future of The Legend of Zelda? It was a fantastic opportunity for mid to long form content creators and the community itself to speculate about the future of Zelda and tell each other what they wanted to see. However, there was one thing missing from this entire collaboration, and that's the Shorts creators. And so, after getting the go-ahead from Zeltic, I was able to organize some of the greatest Shorts creators on the platform. And although there may not be 30 of us, we're still eager to answer the same question. What do the Zelda Shorts creators want to see in the future of The Legend of Zelda? A common theme for the most recent Zelda games has been bigger is better. This is unsurprising since this has been the general theme for the Nintendo Switch at large. Smash Bros. Ultimate brought back every fighter and added a ton more. Mario Kart 8 has nearly 100 different courses to choose from while racing. Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom both embody this idea. Together, they have nearly the same amount of content as every other Zelda game combined. It makes sense why they made these games the way they did, and I had a lot of fun with these enormous games. But if they announce that we are getting another game that follows this same formula, I will immediately vaporize the instant my brain is capable of registering the sound waves as information. The Zelda series rides itself on innovation and creativity. The last thing I want from the series is more of the same. This goes for open world games and the traditional elements of the Zelda series. I don't want another Breath of the Wild, but I also don't want another Ocarina of Time. I would love it if the developers took things that work from both flavors of Zelda, complex dungeons, key items, intuitive exploration, and add a bit of extra spice to them to keep it fresh. Something specific I really want to see in the next Zelda game is density. A problem that I have with many different Zelda games is that I have to travel way too far to interact with the next unique puzzle. While this travel gives a sense of grandeur and scale to the game, it also feeds into the bloat that open world games are so often subject to. I would prefer a smaller world with more unique puzzles over a large world with fewer or more redundant puzzles. I think one way to do this would be to have the game take place in a different setting than usual. One suggestion I've made in the past is to make a more steampunk or sci-fi Zelda game that takes place in an urban environment. A densely packed city could be a solution to the bloat. It doesn't even need to be a traditional city. It could be a weird fantasy Zelda city with changing gravity, twisted hallways, and non-Euclidean geometry. Think of it as one giant dungeon that contains smaller dungeons inside of it. With some of this strange new environment, it would also allow for Nintendo to make some of their most interesting lore yet. How magic and curses interact with the pseudo-modern era would be really cool. I also think this would be a fantastic opportunity for the Zelda team to pull a soft reboot of Zelda lore. Imagine with me for a moment that in this densely packed urban environment, we have a library of sorts. You have the history section that talks about the important games in the series and details the lore that the developers want to follow. This would create the actual canon of the series. They can simultaneously leave it vague, but still give a general framework by which to go from. Then you can have a different section in this same area labeled fiction that tells stories from games like Four Swords or the Oracle games, or maybe even the Tingle games. This gives an opportunity to discredit contradicting lore in the series and move on with more uniform storytelling without holding the developers hostage to lore that was created at 3 a.m. in a fever dream trying to finish their game. All of this being said, as my comments frequently point out, my opinions suck. So I hope you enjoy the thoughts of all of the other Zelda Shorts creators.
Hey, I'm Nat, and here's what I want from the next 3D Zelda game. Before I even start, I just want to say that I really do like the open world formula. Tears of the Kingdom is deservedly my third favorite Zelda game, but falls short to those of Wind Waker and Skyward Sword, two of the most famous linear Zelda games. And the reason for that is mainly the story. I know that these games get a lot of hate for their stories, and while they aren't bad, it's just that they don't leave me wondering what's next. They don't leave me satisfied with a real impactful ending, and they don't leave me crying on the floor like a certain someone did. Another thing to bring back would be some, not all, of that linear feel. For example, heart pieces. Those have basically been scrapped since Breath of the Wild, until Echoes of Wisdom. And yes, shrines are fun, yes, they look pretty sick, and yes, they are a good challenge, but they get so repetitive. And I'm not really gonna talk about the dungeons, but Tears of the Kingdom was a step in the right direction. So to summarize, I really want a very good and impactful story, a more linear feel that doesn't take away from some sorts of freedom, and I didn't really get a chance to mention this, but a very polished and also watercolor-esque art style, almost like Skyward Sword.
Okay, so let's talk about the future of Zelda, and I'm sure I'm gonna rile up a lot of you. I'm gonna show you the 3 things that Zelda needs to keep doing to be successful, and the 3 they need to stop immediately. If you ask most Zelda fans or YouTubers on what they would want, they would probably say things like story, lore, heck, even good dungeons or boss fights. But you're all wrong. For me, I take a lot of what Shigeru Miyamoto says to heart, and his philosophy embodies my values. First up, make it fun and easy to pick up. You should be playing the game in less than a minute of picking up the controller. Make it easy to start, to lure people in, but hard to master, so people spend a lot of their time here. Secondly, make it replayable. Miyamoto loves having New Game Plus in his games. It's the idea to keep going through in unique and interesting ways. And I agree, because the mark of a great game is wanting to play it the second you stop, because now you can appreciate it and approach it in a whole new way. And finally, progression systems make you feel powerful. Zelda is sometimes referred to as an action RPG. You gain weapons, you increase health, you get more powerful. That's the core of Zelda, and that still needs to be a component. Now, here is what they need to stop doing. First off, cut back on the story. Back in the day, you were dropped into a world, no explanation, just go. And I love that. Maybe it's all the Dark Souls I've been playing, but I don't want constant story to interrupt me. Miyamoto said it best, games are not a platform to tell a story. If I'm not crying, like the end of Final Fantasy X, or a conspiracy gun nut like at the end of Metal Gear Solid,
Nanomachine, Psycho Mantis, Deep Throat,
then I do not care. It's just filler, let me have fun. Second thing they gotta stop is this massive open world bloat. Stop it. Just stop it. There is no reason I need to spend 5 minutes running from one place to another. I'm looking at you, Elden Ring. How does this add to the game? It's just lazy. Game design should be precise and craft the situation for a gamer. Look at Resident Evil 4, Claire Obscure 33, or even Mario Wonder. There is no wasted space in these games. They're just carefully designed levels. And finally, stop it with the weapon breaking nonsense. I get it. It feels cool to whip around these weapons like you're in a John Wick movie, using every little thing at your disposal. But you know what else is cool? Having a Hylian shield and Master Sword that doesn't break every 5 minutes. Look, if you want to encourage players to use new weapons or have weapon degradation, there are other ways to do it. Ones that don't make the player feel like they're wasting their time or losing something precious. And that's my top wishes and recommendations for the new Zelda title. Let me know what you guys think below. I'll be waiting in the comments to fight everyone.
The future of Zelda games is fickle. The majority of Zelda fans are really subscribed to the idea of open-world, sandbox-type games, like Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild. These numbers prove this. And this makes me very scared and quite sad for what the future of the franchise has in store. I want Zelda games to go back to their classic ways of traditional dungeons, progression, and item acquisition. I also miss the green tunic. However, I am not saying I hate Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom, just that those two games had too much freedom, and they strayed very far from their classic predecessors. So the next game should learn from the past and the present, and combine the concepts of the older games and some from the new games to make the perfect mix of both. I have some minor random hopes too. Number 1. I would like Link's house to have a big connection to the main plot of the game, like having an entire hidden underground village or city that Link has to discover for his quest, all secretly beneath his own house. Number 2, a return to the idea of a concealed dungeon that is completely optional. You could beat the game and have no idea that you missed an entire dungeon. It could have a really overpowered item you obtain that could greatly help during battles. Number 3, a deeper dive into Link's character. I would like it for Link to have more family bonds and backstory to show that he has feelings, hopes, and dreams. And just like Wind Waker and Skyward Sword, I would like Link's main quest to have a reason and personal motivation on why he is embarking on a dangerous journey. And those are just some of my thoughts and wishes for the next Zelda game.
The main thing I would want on the Switch 2 for Zelda is Wind Waker HD. remake, like a full remake, Breath of the Wild engine, everything, but they kind of destroyed my dreams for that, so we can really hope for Ocarina of Time, maybe? I don't know. I do think that Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are leading the series in a great direction, but I do think it's important to call back some previous Zelda game elements. I know lots of people care about the dungeons and puzzles of the Zelda series, but for me, it was always about exploration, and I still think that is the heart of the series. And I think if Nintendo does this very specific thing from the previous games in the newer Zelda games for the Switch 2, they will greatly increase enjoyment during exploration. And that's simple. Bring back dungeon items. Maybe not dungeon items per se, but don't give the player all of the abilities from the get-go. Have them go through a dungeon using a specific new mechanic or ability or item. Instead of having 4 tutorial shrines that teach you all the items partially, make use of a full dungeon to introduce one ability and explore it thoroughly. The player will then be able to use that ability in the world to discover secrets they haven't before, kind of like a Metroidvania or a search action game, as Nintendo likes to call it. And a cool new setting could be pretty neat. Something spooky, cyberpunk, space. I don't know, they've done a pretty stellar job the past 40 years. I think they got it.
With the gap between now and the last 3D Zelda game being over 2 years, it's time to start thinking about what's next for the franchise. So here are my wishes for the next Zelda game. Though I do love the old linear style Zelda, I think an open air formula would be the best way to go for the next installment, as it casts more of a modern light on the game and would bring back in the huge new fanbase games like Breath of the Wild have attracted. Even though this is the case, I don't think old Zelda should be abandoned completely, and that bits of it should be worked into a new kind of formula. For example, I think progression locks should make a return. Like maybe before continuing to another part of the map, you'd need to grab a new item or power from a dungeon. On the topic of dungeons, I think traditional Zelda dungeons would go a long way in terms of satisfying older formula fans. Tears of the Kingdom was a step in the right direction, but we need to go back to the days of small keys and dungeon items. I would also love for the open world to be more interactive. Though there were towns in the previous open air Zeldas, I think having different, smaller settlements across the world which you could explore, talk to NPCs in, and buy properties and things like that would add a lot of life to the world. Also, a more easy to follow and emotional story would be excellent. Less like Tears of the Kingdom and more like Skyward Sword. More characters like Midna and less like Sonia. Now, my last wish to wrap everything up is a return to more complex combat. You know, crouch stabs and different movement combos. It was always something that I loved in the series. And with that, those are all of my wishes.
When you ask a Zelda fan what they want from the next Zelda game, most of them will say they want things like better dungeons, a better story, etc. And I agree, I want those things too, but others can argue those points better than I can. So let's get a little more specific. I think the next Zelda game needs to bring back people that know Link. One of the most baffling design choices for Tears of the Kingdom was the decision to make most of the NPCs forget who Link is. To me, it made it feel like the events of Breath of the Wild didn't happen and weren't important. And also, like Link isn't an established character. He feels more like a typical RPG self-insert character, which I definitely see the value in for many video games, but this is Link, Hylia's chosen hero. He should be a more well-renowned character, especially after saving Hyrule just a few years prior. So I think Nintendo should bring back cozy villages for the game to start in where all the villagers know who Link is. Good examples of this are Kokiri Forest in Ocarina of Time, Outset Island in Wind Waker, Ordon Village in Twilight Princess, and Skyloft in Skyward Sword. All of these starting towns gave Link more of an identity while also making emotional story beats more impactful. Kokiri Forest creates a mystery around Link's origins. Outset Island establishes a peaceful, wonderful community that's suddenly struck by tragedy. Ordon Village shows how important Link is in his community and how much the people rely on him, until those very same people that rely on him are put in danger. Skyloft gives Link a more concrete backstory and personality, along with having tons of side characters that feel real and immerse you into the beautiful world with all of their side quests. It's good for world building, it makes you feel more attached to the side characters, and it makes Link seem like a hero to everybody in Hyrule, not just Zelda. When you compare these starting towns to how the Wild Era games start, it starts to make the Great Plateau and the Great Sky Island feel too gamified, like they only exist to introduce new mechanics. Finally, I think the world should be more reactive to the player in the next Zelda game. Whether that world is Hyrule or somewhere new, I think Zelda games in general could benefit greatly from making the player's actions feel more impactful. Tears of the Kingdom dabbled in this with things like stopping the relentless snow in Rito Village and convincing the Zora to stop peeing in their water. But imagine how much more satisfying it would be to see Castletown being rebuilt by the end of Tears of the Kingdom instead of just having Lookout Landing. Link works hard, he saved the world twice in this era, and Castletown was a very important place. The recent voice memories make it clear that it was a central hub for facilitating commerce in Hyrule. Instead of making the player load a save from before the final boss fight, let us see the fruits of our labor. It would be much more satisfying than helping to build Terrytown or committing election interference in Hateno. It would help the world feel more lived in and real. But that's enough from me. This next person brings up some really good points probably. Check it out.
There's no question the next Zelda game is most likely in development. With Tears of the Kingdom and Echoes of Wisdom behind us, fans are wondering where Nintendo will take the series next, and here's what I'm hoping for. First and foremost, we have to be able to pet the dogs. I mean, look at this face. There are adorable, loyal, and curious dogs roaming around the stables in both Wild Era games, and yet we can't even give them a single pat on the head. Out of all the things we could do in both games, it still blows my mind how we can't give these creatures the love they deserve. Second, I still want the next game to embrace the open world format, but I'd love to see it paired with more structured linear dungeons. Tears of the Kingdom made big strides in that direction. The wind, fire, water, and lightning temples were all a step up from what we had in Breath of the Wild. They felt a little more like classic Zelda dungeons with themed environments and mechanics tied to the regions, but even then they were still a bit short and light on complexity. I'm hoping the next entry brings back full-scale temples with layered puzzles, unique dungeon items, and that satisfying sense of progression that made places like the Forest Temple or Snowhead feel unforgettable. Third, it's time to leave Hyrule. Both the Wild Era games, in my opinion, were amazing, but after spending hundreds of hours exploring the vast corners of this kingdom across 2 games, it's time to say goodbye, at least for a while anyway. Let us explore a new region, something mysterious and unfamiliar. Nintendo could introduce a completely new world. Personally, I would love to see Termina again. The lore in the Zelda series is deep, and there's so much potential in branching out beyond Hyrule's borders to tell a fresh and expansive story. Fourth, ditch the memories. I like storytelling through exploration, but collecting memories out of order makes emotional arcs confusing and less impactful. For example, the first memory I found in Tears of the Kingdom was memory number 9, Sonia is caught by treachery. If memories return, which I don't think they will, but if they do, they should be unlocked in sequence or tied more directly to the main story path. And fifth, a better UI, and I'm mainly referring to this. Constantly sorting through items like this slows down the gameplay. It's manageable, but with how much time you spend in the inventory screen, a more intuitive UI would go a long way. There's a lot of potential for the next Zelda game to push boundaries while honoring what's made the franchise so timeless. What do you want to see in the next Zelda adventure?
I really hope that the next mainline Zelda game has a more narrative-driven plot progression, much like Skyward Sword. That game was clear in its focus. This is the origin story of the series. You are actively racing around Hyrule chasing after Zelda, and the world slowly opens up around you. You are playing the story beats one at a time. In both the early days of Zelda, such as A Link to the Past and Ocarina of Time, as well as the modern Zeldas Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, and Echoes of Wisdom, you had a varying degree of freedom at which you could explore the world. There were story beats, but they were batched into arcs. Take Ocarina of Time, for example. You start by collecting the 3 spiritual stones in Act 1. Then in Act 2, you gather the 7 medallions, and you had some freedom in how you went about that. For Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, the whole world was available to you from the beginning. In Skyward Sword, you go through each section and it's mandatory. You follow Zelda to the Sealed Grounds, meet her captor Girahim, and chase him around the surface. You are actively doing something that drives you through and around the game. That's what I want. Despite what I feel is a commonly accepted notion that the Zelda team doesn't care about the story and lore, I feel the complete opposite, and I really want the Zelda team to flex that ability. Their story writing of late especially has been phenomenal. From Skyward Sword on, I'd argue Triforce Heroes and Echoes of Wisdom are the only below top tier stories we've received, and even those are good stories. Let's look at Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom again real quickly. If you spend any time on reviews of these games, you'll come across somewhat of a maligned feeling on their stories or lack thereof. I'd honestly chalk that up to how the stories were told. not the quality of the story itself. If you watch either of these stories like a short movie, you will really see how incredible they are. They both invoke a ton of emotion following Zelda's journey in each respective game. But let's take a closer look at Tears of the Kingdom story, because this one's a little more controversial. It really is a tearjerker as Zelda develops a deep relationship with Rauru and Sonia, only to have it ripped from her, all the while learning the reason why fate would bring her back to this moment in particular, and the realization of what she must do to save Hyrule. We're actually going to get this opportunity with Age of Imprisonment, but playing this story out in real time and actively participating in it would have made this experience like a bazillion gratitude crystals out of 10 for me. Now, I am refraining from conjecturing what I want the story to be about, because it could be literally anything, right? The Zelda team has the flexibility to insert any event into Hyrule's history. Point being, I don't need them to pick something we already know about, like the founding of Hyrule or flooding Hyrule. Yeah, exactly. After Majora's Mask, they were just like, oh, why don't we flood Hyrule? That'll be fun. Without any prior notion that that could be a thing. I still want the medieval fantasy setting, so please don't send Link to space or something, but other than that, go nuts. But I want to play out the story in real time and in order that makes sense, because you will get to experience each main character's arc and development and the events unfolding around them.